One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. Furman Athletic Director Mike Buddie is on One Question today, and Mike recently wrapped up his first, not your first hire at Furman, Mike. You've been there now for almost a year and a half, but I'd say your first high-profile hire in new football coach Clay Hendrix, who was a former assistant at Furman, had been at the Air Force Academy for a number of years. Prior to your time in Greenville, of course, you spent a number of years in senior leadership at Wake Forest. Part of the Danny Manning hire, I'm going to assume part of the Dave Clawson hire. But I'm interested in this being kind of your first, if you'll let me call it your first high profile hire at Furman. And now it's your search. It's not Ron Wellman's search that you're helping with. This is your search. Does that change anything about the dynamics of how you executed the process compared to maybe how you guys did it at Wake?
Well, yes, certainly. It's always a little safer to be the advisor than it necessarily is to be the guy that's pulling the trigger. And, anybody who's paying attention to the landscape of college athletics today knows that, athletic directors are tied to these high profile hires, as you said. So, certainly the biggest challenge, and in this situation, I didn't use a search firm as valuable as I think they are. I just couldn't get to the point where it would have been the best use of Furman's resources at this point. Fortunately, I had enough contacts still in the ACC and some other schools, and certainly had a year and a half to make some really good relationships at other schools. So I could do a lot of due diligence on my own and really hunkered down and lock the doors. Because when you're the guy making the call, the one thing that you've got to make sure that you do is not put the university at any type of risk. So, we had a great pool of applicants, and as you sort through those, it's obvious to you early that there's, dozens of people who on paper can do the job. And then it just comes down to who's the best fit for Furman, who's the best fit for Mike Buddie and my style of leadership and what I'm looking for at this point in time. And that led us to Clay Hendrix, who fortunately had been here before. And then I also think fortunately, had spent the last 10 years at the Air Force Academy recruiting a similar type of kid that we like to recruit, and having some tremendous success on the field as well.
Okay, a couple of things you just noted in that comment I want to follow up on, and one of which is you talked about, fit. We hear a ton about fit, of course. Jed Hughes, I listened to a podcast with Jed Hughes maybe a week ago. He uses the word alignment, of course. Same thing, they're synonyms. But how do you weigh, let's say you come across a highly accomplished head coach, and maybe you don't feel like the fit would be perfect, but their body of work historically is over the top good, or their results in the most recent future are really impressive. Does that make you pause? And if so, how do you work through that process? Or if you don't feel like there's an exact fit there, do you move right on?
No, if the body work is that impressive, I think you can coax yourself in. I mean, I like being pushed and I like being challenged, and certainly my personal way of doing things is not always necessarily the best way. For me, fit at the end of the day, a lot of times I'll just say, is it a guy that you want to go have a beer with at the end of the day? The hours that these guys work and the stress that we're all under, you've got to be comfortable and almost looking forward to picking up the phone every Monday morning, whether you got beat 38-2 or you won 55-14, to get together and go grab a cup of coffee and kick things around and how can we get better. And so, for me, there are going to be people who may not be the perfect fit, and a lot of times I think that'll even make me better. So yeah, the body of work, the fit, they're all just variables that all go together to try to lead you to the right person.
Of course, previously you've done a baseball head coaching search already in your tenure with the Paladins. When you thought about who internally should be a part of your, you used the term advisor when you were at Wake, so maybe this little advisory team you may have used at Furman. How did you go about selecting that for the two different searches? Was it the same group of individuals, different group of individuals? Why on both ends?
That's a great question. I have a small group of people who I think really understand how I tick, what I'm looking for, what my expectations are, and some of them know a ton about college athletics, and some of them really don't know a whole lot, but they know character, and they can judge feel and fit and all those things. And obviously, baseball was a much smaller group. It was an internal group of those people that I kind of mentioned. I reconvened that same group for the football search, but as many do, I had the internal committee, and then I also had an interview committee that was a little bit broader, probably 12, 13 people, and then I had an external committee as well that I had formed, that really was stakeholders and donors and people interested in the program. And so I had three levels of involvement. One that was really the decision-making group, and then another that I just thought was important, that they get to feel like they were involved in the process and certainly have a say in meeting the finalists. And then, the external group that you've got to be very careful with in this day and age with the internet, but providing updates if and how I could, allowing them the opportunity to at least, hit reply to one of my emails and give me their 2 cents. And all those things are really important if you want to build a program and build trust, and provide transparency in the process. And I think it went fairly well.
I'm curious, of that third group you mentioned, just from a ballpark standpoint, how many days did your search last exactly? Do you know that off the top of your head?
14.
I'm sure your wife knows it. Okay, 14. Okay. How many times would you ballpark that you communicated with that third group, that external group, in those 14 days?
I can tell you it was 4, in a broad sense. So I sent an update the morning that we were going to make the transition, so that they kind of knew as almost in real time. I sent a second update with a profile of the ideal candidate and the characteristics that we were looking for. And then I sent a third update with just a vague timeline on when they can expect to hear something. And then I sent a fourth email the morning of the press conference to let them know. And of course, word had gotten out by them, but I still felt it was important to quote unquote leak it to them, so that they could hear it before me and feel a valuable part of the process.
As an FCS AD, is the use of a search firm, let me see if I can word this correctly, is it potentially less pressing because of the media spotlight not being as bright? And I say that conditionally because there are certainly places around the nation where the media is all over FCS programs, and you very much could be one of those. Was that a component of your decision making on using a search firm or not?
Yeah, absolutely. It was certainly there were some financial implications to it, but again, I mean, I'm connected to Clay Hendrix at the hip now, for better or for worse. We're a married couple, and so, the value of those search firms, to provide you the ability to rest well at night, knowing that there's no skeletons in the closet, and certainly doing due diligence on the front end. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, one of my biggest concerns when I assembled the second committee that I had, which was, a little bit more, was still doing everything we could to protect the confidentiality of these candidates. And what I told them all was, if we end up bringing 3 guys to campus, 2 of them have to go back to their current teams, and those teams don't need to know if they were here. And of course, the internet goes on a wild goose chase most of the time anyway, and there's 10 or 15 names that are thrown about there, and you just got to do your best to keep things quiet so that those candidates who are interested but don't get the job offer, still feel good about the process and that they were taken care of, and that is extremely difficult to do without a search firm, no question. But yeah, I mean, there were not reporters with parked outside at the airport or outside of my office at any point during the process. And, for better or for worse, it happened over break. So our students were gone. And so campus was pretty quiet. And again, we kind of feel like the process played out about as well as it could have.
Now that we're 3 weeks from Clay's announcement, maybe we're a little more than 3 weeks from Clay's announcement, from a structural standpoint of how you ran the search, have you taken time to debrief and think about how you would do anything different in terms of the mechanics of how the search ran?
Yeah, a little bit. I think I would shrink the committee a little bit. What you find in these situations, and I had 5 people on my internal committee, and it was mostly out of necessity. You need a financial person in there to help be able to walk through any details, and a contract type person, and then a number 2 that is a former coach. And at the end of the day, none of them are going to provide you really a lot of critical feedback, because they know that you're hiring one of these 3 guys, and if it happens to be the one that you weren't real high on, you don't want there to be awkward feelings. So one of the things I think I would do at the end of the day, and that was my case at Wake Forest in those searches that you mentioned, Matt, was it was really just the athletic director and myself, and we helped. We had our sports information people helping dig up statistics and any background that we could get. But at the end of the day, everybody knew that it was going to be my decision, and so I wasn't convinced that I was getting the best negative feedback, which I was asking for. What don't you like about each one of these people? Because at the end of the day, they all knew that they were going to have to work with one of them, and it's human nature to be nervous about being too negative about somebody who could very well be the face of your football program for the next decade. So maybe shrinking the size of that internal committee would be one thing that I would adjust.
And that's today's One Question, brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. One Question is designed to give D1 Ticker subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences. One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996.